Hello everybody, sorry there was a technical problem with my, and with my microphone. Where is it? There we are. Technical problem with my stream there, and I had to restart a couple of times. I hope you can all see me now, and I hope this is broadcasting to the correct video. Fantastic to see you all anyway. So this is going to be another very short lesson in which we're going to be looking at some written comprehension skills. Yeah, because I don't have very much time, let's get started. I've got a lesson to teach right after this. If you want to try one of my lessons where you can actually join a Zoom call and talk to the other students, present your work, compare their work, and talk about how everything can be made better, have a look at my website and the tuition page. And if you haven't tried a lesson yet, you can try a first lesson for free just by getting in touch with me, telling me which one you'd like to join. Okay, brilliant. What's going on in the comments? Noti says, I got a question, why did it start but then finish? I got scared, I'm sorry that I scared you. I realized that I was streaming to the wrong video, and then I thought I'd sorted it, then I thought I hadn't, and then I just stopped, cleaned everything up, and started again. I'm sorry about that. Right, okay, so we've got the text for today's lesson, and here you've got this beautiful picture of Death Valley. Oh, I'm sorry about the zoom thing in the corner, never mind, well, let's not worry about that. Got this beautiful picture of Death Valley, which is a very beautiful, very deathly place, and we've got this very short text about it. And the first paragraph talks about the people who come into the office. And we've got the first question, which also relates to those people. What things do all the people described in paragraph 1 have in common? Answer using your own words as far as possible. So the first thing we need to do is work out who these people are who are described in paragraph 1. So let's have a look. So we need to find them all. So here in paragraph 1, we have a parade of adventurers. But who are they? We've got press agents, promoters, moguls of mining, and prospectors, who are people who go out looking for new sources of precious things, who, having struck it rich, so these people have become rich, now lived grandly in luxury, basically. So they're all people who've become rich. Now, why have they become rich? What are they doing here? They've become rich because of Death Valley. And it's very important that you read the whole text before you answer the questions. What reasons are there given for the wealth coming from Death Valley? And really there's only one reason given, which is next to my head here. It's the borax, and down the bottom there's a definition that says borax, a mineral used for many things such as household detergents. So it's a very, very valuable thing. So implicitly they become rich from the mining of this mineral. You must read the whole text. The question says that they're the people described in paragraph 1. It doesn't say that the information is only in paragraph 1. They've all become rich because of Death Valley, but more specifically because of the minerals from Death Valley. A mineral is something that you mine, anything you pull out of the ground through mining. Okay. And are there any other people? Yes. There are also liars, an engaging breed of liars, so they're quite a fun kind of liar. What might they be lying about? Well, they've all got stories of Death Valley. So there are people who come lying about Death Valley. There are the people who become rich because of Death Valley, and there are the people who lie about becoming rich or would like to become rich. And an occasional adventuress. S implies a woman who by luck or love had left a boomtown crib to live thereafter in marble halls. The language is complicated, but the basic idea should be reasonably clear. This is someone who's come out trying to find a rich husband from among the people at the top and has found one. This is quite an old text. Implicitly, it's getting on for 100 years old. Now it says more than 3 million people lived within a day's journey in 1925. So it's obviously after 1925, but there are also enough hints here that this is, you know, a fairly early text, that it isn't something modern. Okay, so what have we got? The people we've got are these people who become rich because of Death Valley and the minerals there, and people who would like to. So they've all become rich or would like to become rich, and they all have stories about Death Valley. And that's essentially it. So let's write our answer in. They have, sorry, very hard for me to write on the screen. They have all become rich or would like to they've all become rich or would like to because of Death Valley and its minerals. You could say borax as well if you wanted to, but this just shows understanding what the borax is. Oh, sorry, I'm not on the right screen, excuse me. There we are, because of Death Valley and its minerals. And then the other important point is that they all have stories about the place. It says, all brought arresting yarns. You need to spot that that's a story, not a kind of thread. Yarns of Death Valley, so stories about Death Valley. They all have interesting stories about Death Valley. If you said that they'd all become rich and you missed out the stuff about the liars, I think I'd probably still be okay. But to be really accurate, you need this point about how some of them aren't rich but would like to be, or would like to be seen as rich. It's a 4-mark question. We've got 2 points and each of them is fully explained. So for example, stories, not just stories in general, not stories about dragons, stories about Death Valley. Rich, or would like to be, because of Death Valley, and I've added and its minerals for extra clarity. So that's definitely going to be a correct answer. But we started with the process of finding the information in the paragraph. Okay, question 2. Why does the author point out that more than 3 million people live within a day's journey in 1925? In line 7, a 2-mark question. Why does the author do this? So we need to look at the text. And we're looking at, let's pull up a different colour. We're looking at the beginning of the second paragraph, living the day's journey in 1925. But excepting a few, what does excepting a few mean? Of course, it means apart from a few who lived really nearby. Those who had actually been in Death Valley could be counted on one's fingers and toes. So what does that mean? If you count on your fingers and toes are 20 things. So hardly any people, in other words. So what's this saying? It's saying loads of people lived nearby, but only a tiny number had been in. Why would you mention that loads of people lived nearby there? Why is it relevant? Well, if loads of people live nearby, you'd expect lots of people being into Death Valley. If loads of people live near to London, you'd expect that a lot of them had been to London. But loads of people live near Death Valley, and very few of them have been into it. So what's the point of mentioning the number? It's to make it seem especially strange that few people have been in. It's to make the reader think, so why have so few people gone in? And then, of course, that leads into the author talking about what a dangerous and horrible place it is, or at least dangerous. So we just need to explain that. I need to go on to the answer page here. We just need to explain that clearly using our own words and showing understanding. So let's put the first thing, the fact that so many people, so that's showing that the point of is not the 3 million, but the fact that it's a big number. The fact that so many people lived nearby made it especially remarkable. So remarkable, surprising, that so few had visited Death Valley, let's say that. Okay, the fact that so many people live nearby made it especially remarkable that so few visited Death Valley. So the first point is, this is making clear that there are lots of people, that's fairly obvious, but then why does that matter? It's to emphasise how strange it is that so few of them had gone there. This is a very clear, simple answer for 2 marks. The only thing that isn't clear is my handwriting. I apologise for that, but I've been reading it aloud, so you know what I'm doing. All right, so the next question is, and I've just reduced this rather long comprehension down to just 4 questions, but let's see whether I can get them through all of them in time. The next question asks us to explain the effect of the following words. So we've got parade in line 1. Let's have a look at line 1. So let's pick out a different colour here. In the newspaper office where I worked was a constant parade of adventurers. And then the author tells us who these adventurers were. Press agents, promoters, moguls and mining prospectors, and then the people who came after them, the liars and the occasional adventuress. But the parade is these first people. Press agents, promoters, moguls. Now these are all rich people, right? They've all struck it rich. It says it here. So they're rather grand. They're like people parading in great pomp pomp and circumstance. But also, a parade contains lots of people. If you've only got 4 people, it's not really a parade. A parade is hundreds and hundreds of people marching through the town or whatever. Where I live, there are loads of parades. That's something I'm very familiar with. Lots of parades. So, what have you got here? We've got the grandeur and we've got the number. But I think the number of them is the simpler point to start with. So what's the effect? What does it make us think? It makes us think that there were lots of them, and they were grand, and they were grand, grand and impressive, like, oh, for heaven's sakes, I'm not on the screen, right, like people marching in a procession. Now, I haven't used the third line here, but it's got plenty in it. The large number, grand and impressive, and a comparison to a procession. And notice that word procession, which is different from the word parade. And that's my way of showing that I very clearly understand what a parade is, so that there can be no doubt about that. Scars in line 12. So this here is about, well, it says now they were little more than scars, they, so you need to check what they refers to. It's a pronoun, we need to go back to find the noun. Only makeshift trails left by the wagons that had hauled borax in the 80s. So there weren't any roads, there were just trails left behind by these wagons from the 1880s. It's the 1880s, not the 1980s, this is old. Only makeshift trails left by the wagons that hauled borax in the 80s. These wagons would be horse-drawn. Okay, so these wagons had left trails, and now they were little more than twisting scars through the brush. Little more than. In other words, they've been weathered away. You can't see much of them anymore. How is that like a scar? Well, a scar used to be a wound that's then healed up until you can't see much of it anymore, just the scar. But a scar is often a little bit ugly, you know, a bit rough-edged, and that would match the old trails that are kind of healed up, but not neatly. You know, there's sort of bulges and there are bushes growing across them and that kind of thing. So I think we got those two ideas. So the old trails have shrunk away and are only just visible. Oops, that looks like only just visible. Like scars after a wound has healed. Scars after a wound is healed. They may also be rough-edged and ugly. They may also be rough-edged and ugly, and those are the two things that I said. You'll notice this is a 3 marker, and that strongly implies. Oh no! What am I doing? Why do I keep doing this? There we are. So again, I've definitely got enough in here for the 3 marks. I've got the idea of the trails shrinking away and not being very visible, like scars. But I've also got the point about the ugliness that I mentioned, and I've definitely got enough here for the 3 marks. Always pay attention to the number of marks and think about it. The effect of each of the following words. You can see what I've done here. I've spoken about what ideas these words create in my mind. And that's the key thing. Don't just go back into the passage and say, Scars talks about the trails. There were trails here because there have been wagons from miners in the last century, and these had left marks on the landscape. You aren't talking about the effect there. To talk about the effect, you need to go beyond the simple meaning and talk about what it suggests. How are these trails like a scar? Why has the author used that word, and what does it make you think of? It makes you imagine a scar, so just a line that used to be a wound, and it makes you imagine something a little bit rough and ugly, I think. Some people are lucky and have very neat scars, but I don't think that's the typical image of a scar that people have. Okay, and on to the last one here. What do we learn about the personality of the shop or shop/hotel, so I guess it's a shop and a hotel owner, give evidence for your points. Let's look at the text and let's see if I can remember to switch back to this before I write anything down. So here, this character is here towards the end. It's in the last couple of paragraphs. So you can see that this that there's a sign over a false-fronted building, which is a 2-cabin resort. In other words, you know, it's a little motel or hotel with just 2 cabins for people to stay in. And there's also a shop, because it says free information. That's going to lure you in. There are cabins, eats, so food, gas, oil, and refreshments. I guess that must mean drinks as opposed to the food, I suppose. Needing all these items, okay, I parked my car and walked into a foretaste of things to come. So in other words, this place gave a hint of what it would be like beyond this point in Death Valley. So the owner, a big, genial fellow. So remember, the question is asking us about the personality. So let's look for things that are to do with personality. He's genial. Was behind the counter using his teeth to remove the cork from a bottle labelled bourbon. A task he deftly accomplished by twisting on the bottle instead of the cork. Okay, so what? There's something a bit creative, a bit ingenious. So he's got it in his mouth, he's not trying to turn his head. He pops it in his mouth and then goes to get the cork off the bottle. Bourbon, American whiskey. Yeah. So, you know, he's got this habit. You could say it implies that he's creative, a bit ingenious. I don't know. I think many people would learn this with a bit of time. But that's definitely a point that you could make. It says a task he deftly accomplished. So something a bit skillful about it. He says he'd come to headquarters. He beamed. So that's him being friendly. But then that's very similar to him being a genial fellow. So I don't think that's a separate point. Don't know your drinking sentiments, but if you'd like to wet your whistle, take one on the house. So he's generous. He offers the drink. So he's friendly, he's generous, he's quite skillful. What else? He's also quite, he's quite a clever businessman, because he starts off by offering the free thing. And then after that, there are all these things that you might pay for. This is exactly what I do on my website. I lure people in with lots of free papers and free trials of lessons and that kind of thing. And then I hope that they like them and then will stay and buy things. It's the same kind of principle. That's what this chap is doing on his sign. Come in for the free stuff and buy all the other stuff while you're here, if you want to, but you will. It's that kind of idea. So what have we got? We've got these business savvy. That's the point up here, the free information. We got the friendliness. It's quite skillful with the bottle. We've got generosity. It's quite similar to the friendliness. Maybe I don't want to go with both. Okay, and then, because I need to finish in a sec, I'm just going to talk about what I might do here. So basically, it's a 4-mark question. 4-mark question. And it says, give evidence for your points. So I didn't mean to cross it out, I meant to underline it. And it's, of course, it's about personality. We got those points. So how many points do you need? For 4 marks, almost certainly 2 points with some evidence. But if you've got spare time, put more down just in case they want 4 points. And the points that you might make here, well, you could say something like he's jolly and he's welcoming because the author immediately thinks that he's genial, or because he beams as he puts the bottle on the table. You could say that he's quite inventive because he uses his hands rather than his teeth to get the cork off the bottle while holding it in his mouth. Or you could just quote the word deftly, because he removes the cork from the bottle deftly. You could talk about him being generous when he says take one on the house. You could talk about him being very business savvy or cunning or smart because of the way he uses free information to lure people in. I don't think it's that smart. I think it's a fairly obvious thing to do nowadays, in the age of the internet. But back then it was perhaps a little bit less obvious that this was the way to run a shop. So there are various points that you could make. Get 2 of those down with evidence, and then when you've got time later in the test, come back and add some more. All right, people. These are very short lessons these days. I squeeze them in the half an hour before my class. So thank you very much for joining me. I did a question and answer session last week, so I'm not going to be doing questions right now because I want to whiz on. Nazarene says, Robert, I've been waiting for you to say hello. Hello, everybody. Hello. I'm whizzing on. Nice to see so many familiar faces in the comments. Oh no, I'm sorry if people waiting in the false live. Yeah, well, that was something I messed up. But I hope this is working now properly anyway and that you can see it. All right, people, I'm going to call it a day there. I have to get going. Please come and try one of my classes. They're all sold out this week apart from Thursday. I have some spaces on Thursday. So if you want to try one of those slots, if you haven't tried one of my lessons yet, ask your parent, not you, your parent, to email me asking me to sign you up. And I'll be glad to give you a free trial. And then next week, there are various lessons with free slots that you could try. All right, everybody. Bye-bye. Fantastic to see you. And I very much look forward to seeing you next week for another Easy 11